Right then, let's go.
Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of the 2-on-1 Powerchair Football podcast, powered as always by our brilliant sponsors MK Battery. MK Battery's commitment to Powerchair Football goes far beyond supplying the batteries that keep our chairs moving. From grassroots initiatives to the elite international stage, they've played a vital role in helping the sport grow, supporting athletes, clubs and competitions right across the pathway, and we're really proud to have them back in this podcast. My name is Ryan Sipple and I'm delighted to be your sole host for today's episode. As we look forward to what promises to be a massive few months for England, there's a lot happening both on and off the court. With the EPFA Nations Cup approaching, England's preparations are entering a crucial stage. Training camps have intensified, the squad is close to being finalised, and momentum is starting to build right across the programme. But behind the scenes, there is a huge amount of work going on to make sure everything is aligned, from logistics and squad management to coaching, planning and player development. Today, we are joined by someone who plays a key part in all of that. He made his mark on the international stage with Scotland, leading them to their first ever Nations Cup qualification. Since then, he stepped into a major role with England, appointed as team manager and assistant coach last October, and he has since become a central figure across both the senior and development squads. I'm delighted to say joining me on this podcast is Craig Peattie. Craig, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Ryan. Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure.
It's great to have you. Have you had the chance to recover after St George's Park last week?
Just about. Had a debrief with Adam yesterday, and that was one of the topics of conversation. Yeah, it was the recovery period.
Having spent so much time with you and the squad, I can probably attest more than most just how full on it was, physically, mentally, the whole thing. But we will unpack that in this episode. So as we tend to do with these types of episodes, I want to start with your coaching story. You've been involved in Powerchair Football for a long time now, and across that time you've held some really influential roles, from grassroots to the international stage. It's been a journey that's taken you through national systems and major tournaments, and now, as alluded to at the start, into one of the most exciting coaching setups in the sport. For anyone that doesn't know the full story, how did you first get involved in Powerchair Football, and what's that journey look like so far?
Absolutely. I think you've kind of nailed it there. It's been some journey over the last kind of 14, 15 years across Powerchair Football. And there'll be many probably listeners and viewers out there that maybe don't know my background and kind of wonder who I am. So yeah, good to get into that. Kind of my background really, sports coaching at college and sports development. So I've got a diploma in sports coaching and an honours degree in sports development. So that's sort of my background in terms of education wise. Throughout those times I was looking for placements, and Powerchair Football had just got started in Scotland, roughly 3 months old. Just by luck, if you like, the first ever squad was about 5-10 minutes from my home, so I thought give it a try. My background before then was mainstream football, both community and pro youth clubs, but I thought I'll give this a try, and then since then it's kind of been hooked, as many people in Powerchair Football are, to be honest. So got involved in Clyde Powerchair Football Club, who are now Strathclyde here in Scotland. Assistant coach role, and as many other people throughout the sport experience, you end up taking on multiple roles very quickly, progressing on to kind of head coach, vice chair of the club at one point, secretary, treasurer, everything in between in terms of kitmen, mechanics, you name it. As all of us do at the clubs, we take on all of the roles. So that's pretty much my club background. And I'm back at the club here in Scotland. now known as Strathclyde. So that was my first full season back after a couple of years break. You then look at some of the roles off the field. I know you mentioned some. I progressed through the SPFA, so the Scottish Powerchair Football Association, was established in 2015. From there, 2016, I was voted in as vice chairperson of the sport. I think I was 24, 25, roughly that age at the time. 3 years within that position, which then obviously opened my eyes up to sort of the governance within sport, the procedures, the pathways, and more so some of the difficulties that the players and families are going through, to be honest, and how we can then help as an association. 3 years spent in that position before being voted on at the age of 28 as the as the chairperson of the Scottish Powerchair Football Association, in which I spent probably 4 years before opting not to be re-elected and stepping down. Throughout my working life, if you like, I've never had more than or less than 2 or 3 jobs at a time, and that's probably relevant throughout Powerchair football as well. So I had a dual role as well as being chairperson, as well as working with the Scottish national team as well. Slightly different setup to some nations, especially England, where the governing body actually run the national team. So as chairperson, I was obviously involved in setting the governance, if you like, the pathway, the structure, the foundations for the national team, whilst trying to coach them as well. So again, that threw up difficult challenges, many successes, but again, more and more for me to build on and bank. So coaching pathway for the national team started as an assistant coach to Gary. He stepped away a couple of years later. I got the honour of being selected as the head coach, leading the team into multiple Tri-Nations, Home Nations, and then EPFA Cup after COVID, which is probably where we made our biggest mark, qualifying for then the upcoming Euros, which we're all attending. Unfortunately, only losing one game, which was the final. However, what a pleasure it was to take part in a competition at that level and scale, with the athletes and families and players that we had.
We'll certainly unpack that final later in the episode, because I have a lot of thoughts and feelings that I'll touch on. But fast forward to October last year, after all of those incredible influential positions that helped put Scottish Powerchair football on the map, you're named team manager with England. How did that appointment come about? Was it something maybe you've been working towards, or was it just a surprise? You saw an opportunity and you kind of pounced at it?
I think I'll probably go back a couple of months before being appointed. We in Scotland, and I knew I was coming towards the end of my term in Scotland, both with the national team and with the governing body that had been put out, had been officially named. However, I did want to finish kind of on a high, and we ran 3 international tournaments in the space of 6 weeks in Largs, one of which the FA were kind of due to host, but having ran the previous 2, it was sort of a joint effort, if you like, working with some of the other departments within the FA and myself in Scotland. So that's probably what sort of got me noticed and seen, if you like, and built some of those relationships. So when a role did come up, I'd seen it online for the head coach position first of all. It was something I felt that now that I was at the end of my time in Scotland, it was an opportunity I probably couldn't really miss going for, to be honest. So yeah, kind of in between that as well, there's just little bits of work for the European governing body and Feet for the World governing body in terms of governance. But again, I knew I didn't really want to go down that route in terms of long term. Definitely the passion was in working in football associations and being involved in the sort of day-to-day operations and then out on the football court. So then that brought us to October, and again down at St George's Park for the first time. Driving along that driveway into the facility, you see the history of the building, the people who have been there.
So many people say that when they turn that corner, go through the gates, and that drive up to St George's Park, which we touched on in the last episode with Tracy Mayer, the USA head coach, it's just special. Whether you're a player, whether you're a coach, whether you're a fan, it just holds so much weight and significance.
Yeah, it's one of those opportunities you just look around, you're like, I want to be a part of this. So yeah, obviously interview stages, processes went through, discussions, and in October voted in along, or selected with Adam to be part of the new coaching team. Obviously I wear a couple of different hats, but delighted that the position was then offered.
No, that's great. So once you stepped in, what did those first few months look like, especially getting to grips with a new group of players, a new system, and the expectations that come with being part of that England setup?
Yeah, to be fair, we kind of tackled it in a couple of different ways. Mostly looking at the squad's mindset off the court, to be honest, to start with.
Yeah.
Getting across our sort of our strategies, our style of play, how Adam wants and sees the team shaping. But the key message from both of us, I suppose, was we're here as a squad and a collective, and it's probably something we hope that everybody noticed and seen come to fruition through the USA games in camp. However, getting that early message across that it's not a squad of four, it's not four players on the park, every single person has a piece to play. Without naming them, there was individuals in the last game from the side of the park giving constructive feedback. There was individuals spotting things and passing it on to the side to their teammates. There's individuals who have tasks when we're on the bench to feed back to the coaches on what they're seeing and what they're going on, as well as the players then going on the pitch and making an impact as well. We need to make sure that the tactical and technical attributes are being used throughout the game, and I think the not challenge, but one of the things we have to our advantage in England is a lot of our players also coach, so they've got that mindset behind them as well. So it's getting the players to buy into what we're trying to achieve, what we're trying to do, welcome suggestions, but also not to kind of counteract it at times as well. So it's striking that balance, which is something we've tried to do throughout all of the camps, and making sure that the team is versatile to the opponents we play, and we are more difficult to read. Probably then on the court, you would notice one of the things we've been trying to work on more often is set plays, so that's been a big kind of focus of ours.
Yeah, just touching on what you said about a large percentage of your current England setup being established coaches, when you're looking at Chris Gordon and John Bolden coaching and competing at the very top of the National League. There's obviously a shift from previous coaches and taking it into this new era. It's always going to take time to gel, but alongside you in that process is Adam McAvoy, who was obviously appointed head coach the same time you came on board as team manager. How has that partnership developed between the two of you, and what's it like working with him day to day? Because I have the pleasure from a WFA point of view of working alongside him, and I know how passionate he is about the sport and how he's such a good fit for that England role. Yeah,
you've pretty much hit it spot on there, like a perfect fit in my opinion as well. Someone that's very easily to work with. Happy to share ideas, happy to brainstorm, collectively work together. I've had the pleasure of working with Adam, or working alongside him, for many years now, in different guises, whether it's the European Powerchair Football Association, whether it's the WFA linking the Scottish Powerchair Football Association. So we have had those crossovers, which kind of made it a lot easier coming in, especially for me. Adam's got various different networks across the FA and WFA that potentially I don't have or had at the time. So building on that, and he's very open, very honest, and we bounce off each other very well, certainly in my opinion. So he certainly made my transition into the sport much easier than probably what it could have been from that point of view. And then even just the coaching sessions, we sit down, we organise each of them, we pre-plan what we want them to look like, what the key messages are. If there's anything, although I assist, if there's anything thinking or want to step in with, Adam's more than happy. And vice versa with the development squad. If there's something I'm planning as the head coach and Adam's there observing and seeing, if he wants to step in, we've got that relationship where we can as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It does seem from the outside looking in that you have a really good kind of synergy between one another, which will only benefit England as a whole as we approach the Nations Cup, which we will touch on in this episode. So you've had the time to settle into the role and develop that partnership with Adam and the wider FA. I want to zoom out a little bit and look at the senior setup, and you could probably encapsulate the development side in that as well. The day-to-day environment, how the team operates, because your title as team manager, you are juggling a lot of things that people may not necessarily know or see. Can you give us a little bit of insight into that side of things, the logistics, the organisation around camps? And I know you've done a few home nations, but no doubt you're going to be so busy in the lead up to the EPFA Nations Cup. And maybe just summarise the staff involved, so when it comes to video analysis or doctors, etc.
Yeah, in terms of a wider coaching team, if you like, so we've got a multidisciplinary team that consists of the likes of a physio, a doctor, psychologists if needed. We've got the analysis member of staff. We have a kit man. We have our operations team. You then have your front of house team. You then have your meal staff and any staff that then support with the facility itself. So probably liaison and linking with the vast majority of those people every single day at different times to make sure the players have got an environment that they're comfortable in, safe in, but also can thrive in as well. So like you've kind of mentioned already, a lot of the work logistics wise will go on behind the scenes, and most of the players won't even realise what's going on, which hopefully for me means that I'm doing a good job, that they can just concentrate on their football. But like you say, there's various different departments. Before the players even check in, I'll be liaising to make sure all their accommodation is sorted, the rooms are relevant for what they need, care plans are in place, medical support is there, the kit man has got all the supplies that we need, that they're correct, they're going to the correct location. Adam has everything that he needs in terms of what he needs for prep. We have everything probably for the couple of days ahead. Certainly for USA, we had to almost be in our minds that we're 2 or 3 days ahead in terms of logistics to make sure everything's happening. We obviously had WFA in streaming, so making sure we were set up for that. We had medical provisions sorted. The list goes on and on and on, as you're sure to know.
Yeah, I mean, spending time with you last week, there's not often a time where you're not on your phone, looking at your phone when you're not coaching, because that's something people have to consider when it comes to Powerchair football. Certainly the logistical side in a role such as yours, the requirements needed, accessibility, the medical considerations, equipment, care teams, carers. There is so much that people don't really comprehend, certainly when it comes to the FA and how they want to do things, because it's such a professional setup. But just touching on all of those members of staff, that's so akin and similar to what it would be when Thomas Tuchel is taking his side to St George's Park, or Serena Wiegmann's taking her side to St George's Park. So it shows the direction we're going in terms of the professionalism and the wider exposure of it. So that's really great, but I don't envy you in any way, because that role is so demanding, and that's only probably 25% of your role. Obviously, we've touched on the responsibilities from an England senior level, but we'll also touch on the development squad in a minute. Back to the squad, we've had a good few camps now under your belt. Do you feel like things are starting to click and you're starting to understand each other? Are you and Adam starting to properly gel with those coaches within the squad and the younger players within the team?
Yeah, I think as we spoke about the staffing side of things a couple of seconds ago, we're in a very good place off the pitch, certainly from my perspective as a team manager, in terms of having staff now that have been consistent with us, medically, kit men, operations team, and each of the departments have been brilliant, to be honest. Anything we've asked for or anything we need, they've been spot on, so credit to all of them, and that goes to obviously the front of house at the hotel and all that as well, part of the Hilton. Like, everyone has been great with the player needs, but now having that team almost takes away a little bit of pressure off the court and applies it on the court now. We need to make sure we're performing at our optimum levels when we're on the court for match days. Training itself, yeah, I think it's pretty seamless in terms of the drills that we're planning and the reasons that we're doing them, both tactically, technically. Some of the exercises that we're working on, there'll be some adaptations. So we've had some players kind of mix in from seniors to development in terms of the sessions, and there's some adaptations as potentially I go from one assistant coach role on a Friday, Saturday, for example, and then into a head coach role for the development side on a Sunday, where the drills will be slightly adapted based on the development needs of our players and where we're at and what we're working towards. The senior side will obviously be exposed to far more games, if you like, so then we can get a base level and we can assess and we can look at feedback for the players off of that. However, the development side, we need to make sure we're continually testing and making sure that those players are ready to step up. So in terms of the pathway, and it's probably something we'll discuss later, certainly Adam and I have got kind of the same views and opinions on that, and the players that then feed up and down the way.
Yeah. Before we touch on that, I want to go to last week at St George's Park, which for me certainly, and I'm sure you would agree, felt like a really significant moment for the sport and everyone involved. We had 4 squads training under one roof, how I view it. You had the England and the USA senior teams, and you had the England and USA development teams. That sort of setup is so rare, and it created a really unique environment. It was high performance. It was international exchange. There was so much learning and connection happening across all levels. And from the outside, it looked like a huge step forward. From the England senior squad's point of view, how valuable was it to have the USA there, not just to train alongside, but to test yourself in those friendly matches? Although, having watched both, there was nothing friendly about them.
No, you're right. If I put on the elite side of things, the elite hat again, and look at the pathway, like what a test that was for our players to play up against arguably some of the world's best players on home soil, which is maybe an opportunity some of the players never thought that they would get, and it almost brings that confidence along that each player to say, well, look, you're in my home ground here, we've got something to play for. It's not just a friendly, like you say. We are showing the world that we are arguably the best, or if not one of the best teams in the world, and that's where we want to remain. There was nothing friendly other than the name, I suppose. That being said, both teams played absolutely amazingly over both games, but like you say, we've got a shared knowledge in that room, both from the USA coaching staff, our coaching staff, players, whether it's the analysis, whether it's the physios talking to each other, the doctors. I was fortunate enough to get round, and have conversations with almost every single person that was there over the week, and just picking little bits of information that might work for us, or maybe not work so. Prior to playing USA in the first couple of games, we'd looked at their setup, how they might play in terms of formations and shapes, set plays, key players, areas for us not to play in, areas for us that we know we can overplay, areas that we know we can get shots on goal, we can get shots on target, or areas that we can gain possession in. So we had quite a broad knowledge, if you like, for the players to look at over the game. First game, we were able to implement that, and there was a few changes. There was a few things we didn't expect to happen from USA, but similarly we knew that they'd be working on our shape, our tactics, and vice versa. So the Friday night game, which wasn't streamed, was a good opportunity to then test ourselves, bring the players back in and go through a process that they'll go through in the Euros that some might not have been through before, in terms of watching back opponents in a relatively short period of time, assessing our game plan, looking at anything we need to change, are there any threats that we need to identify, is there any weaknesses within ourselves, and quickly putting a plan together to then go back out onto the pitch and either rectify that or continue the way we're going. So that for me was probably the big learning opportunity for the players and for us as a staff, and like I say, those other team members who are now starting to establish around the Powerchair more regularly, to adapt and work in, because we know those will be the staff and going forward for the Euros where we all want to do well.
For sure. And you've touched on it already, but alongside your responsibilities with the senior team, you also lead the development squad almost as head coach. The development squad were involved last week. Can you just touch on what that experience looked like for them? Because I know there were some almost informal fixtures against the USA development players, and how did they respond to that challenge, that environment? Because that's probably a level of intensity that they've never necessarily had, with all due respect to the development home nations which take place every year.
Yeah, you're spot on. It's, again, I mentioned the word test when it came to the elite side in the first team, but again, we've got elite players in the development squad that need that test as well. Again, playing up against what could arguably be some of the best players in the world in the future as well, now that we've seen them. There were some players there of very high quality. They did actually make it into some of the senior games later in the week. And again, that's what we want for our players in the pathway as well. Can they be tested? How do they react to that? How do they do well? USA brought a unique environment on and off the pitch in terms of noise, which again at the home nations we might not get that exposed to. Obviously you'll get cheers, if goals go in you'll get an odd shout, but in terms of the level of noise that came from USA both on and off the court, we found certainly in the first game was an eye-opener for the development players, and something which they then adapted to for the second game on the Thursday. So again, it's getting that environment right, something that might not happen too often, to get a development squad of that calibre, if you like. But what a test and what an opportunity for our players to, one, showcase what they can do, but two, get themselves seen and in the mindsets potentially for future European and world competitions coming up.
Yeah, I think one thing that really stood out to me was the unity across the whole England setup, senior and development, and them having them sort of shared spaces so the development players feel part of that process. And just more broadly speaking, for me, the development squad feels like a real centre point, linking the top end of the game with the future talent coming through, which is almost an impossible task for yourself, for Adam and others, because there is an abundance of talent. You've got players breaking into senior contention, and at the same time on the other side you're staying connected with the national and regional emergent talent programs where that next group of players is coming through. What is for you the aim of the development squad? Because is it purely about progression to the England senior team, or is it more than that? Because the way I see it, the level of talent in the senior squad is outstanding. So even getting into the development squad should be seen as a badge of honour in itself. Not everyone will make that final step up, and I think that's okay. We don't want to dilute the process either, because progression to the top team has to be earned, and that involves a whole mixture of things which you've spoken about: technical, tactical understanding, but also attitude and application. So just back to my earlier question, what is the aim for the development squad? Is it solely progression?
Yeah, I think it has to be more than progression. It has to be developing the player and the person as an individual, redefining sort of what success looks like for them, We're very cautious that we don't want players just to be seen in the development squad as a stepping stone, and if you don't make the senior team, that you're a failure. Because as you've mentioned, there's some extreme, unbelievable talent between both squads, and for the players coming through as well, that maybe just need to tidy up some of other areas of their game. It's what that looks like, and we've been very aware of how the squads are seen and actually the talent levels. So we have been mixing throughout our time senior players in with the development squad, and then trying to get development players mixed in with the senior squad or trained together where we can. It's not always possible and it's not always necessary, but where we can, we do feel that we have an obligation, if you like, to allow that to naturally happen. There's players who have broke through now into the senior squad, and I'm sure they'll have long, successful England careers, and we want to showcase that is possible for players to come, if and when it's earned and it's possible, because we have that duty of care for the game first and foremost. It's not just a case of we're here to focus on X amount of players. We know there'll be a pathway along before. There's been a pathway along before we've joined, and there'll be a pathway along after we leave as well. So we need to make sure we leave it in a good place, and the players understand along the way where they fit in, how they can progress, but also just develop themselves as people and as players, and take that back to their clubs, because ultimately that develops the game at grassroots level, which then hopefully in years to come develops the standard of players coming in along the pathway much higher as well. So yeah, there's that probably wider, broader aspect to the squad.
Yeah, and within that system, you've seen a whole host of different journeys. There isn't one standard way of progressing. Someone like Ethan Fisher, for instance, has almost fast-tracked his way through that, and now is in the conversation for Italy. You've got players like Dan McClellan, Dylan Kelso and Tyler Reeve, who have come through every stage of that pathway. What do those examples and those players say about the strength of the system, and looking ahead as an in your role, how do you intend to link more closely with the National Emergent Talent Programme and the RETP to ensure there is that continual wave coming through?
Yeah, well, first of all, I hope it shows that openness from our coaching team to show that there is opportunities there for players to progress. As you mentioned, some of the names there, those are players who will go on and play key roles, either in the first team or coming on for the first team in the future. There's no doubt about that. And like you say, there's no process that if you follow X, Y and Z that you're in the first team. Different people have different progression routes, different qualities, different personas on and off the pitch that we need to balance well. And some of those players there are perfect examples. And there'll be players throughout the pathways you've mentioned, both for the National Emergent Talent Programme and the Regional Emergent Talent Programmes that we're looking at as well. With Adam's dual role with the WFA, he sees a lot of players. And thankfully with some of the roles and some of the bits of work that I'm seeing in the programmes I'm working on, I'm seeing a lot of the players as well. That is something in terms of the National Emergent Talent Programme that I will be focusing more on as the years progress, certainly after the Euros, to make sure that those players first of all are comfortable knowing myself and knowing Adam if there's an opportunity to progress, but are also comfortable in the environments that we're playing in and where we're asking them to play in as well. We are fortunate enough, and we made this decision early on, that we would watch or attend as much National League games as possible. We know there's players out there that are maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years off even reaching some of the talent programmes, never mind development or senior, but it's important that we've got an eye on of who's coming through. We speak to our players on a regular basis in terms of the league days, and a lot of it's kind of fact-finding information for us, as well as just taking a general interest. What players did they play against that they found tough? Who was coming through the ranks that they thought done well? We look at team shapes, so teams who employ this shape, who done well in this one, if they were to adapt it, what do you think? And as you've seen from the moves and the transfers that happen within the WFA and the leagues, that we then get to see players play across different sort of formations and tactics as well. So it adds to the versatility of the player. So we are aware of that. We do watch almost or all of the National League games as well. So Adam and myself have been down, and we know we're going to some of the next ones. However, the games that we're not there in person, we are watching online. We're lucky enough that WFA stream the games live. So it means I'm always on my phone. Again, never off it. However, I'm always on it, either texting Adam or on the phone to him, and we're discussing players and formations and tactics and set plays. So everybody, whether in the pathway or not, we do have sort of an eye on of where you are and what you're working towards, as well as those conversations and feedback from other people.
I know, working closely with Adam, there is a real desire to create a coaching curriculum that's implemented at every stage of the England pathway, so from the RETP up to the England senior team. And I think that gives us a real opportunity to have alignment across the entire pathway, so making sure that what's being delivered at those respective levels is just scaled up, so irrelevant of what stage you are at in your development, what you're doing emulates or almost mirrors what they're doing, maybe to a greater degree or more complexity as you get up. But if you're at the RETP coming to play football, you're doing a version of what they're doing up the pathway. So I know coaching on the RETP, it's really exciting, but there's a lot of work we can do as an association working alongside the FA that really supports player development and ensures that they're as prepared as possible if and when the call comes that they're going to go up a rung on the ladder, irrelevant of what stage it's at.
It's that education piece around it, isn't it, and how the players then react to that. And to be honest, see if they don't progress, but they've bettered their game, they've bettered their understanding of Powerchair football, that's still a success.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we come back to England, I want to take a diversion and take a moment to reflect on your time with Scotland, because that's, personally speaking, where I started following your journey as a coach, as a professional. And I was there for Scotland's first set of proper competitive international fixtures in Belfast, and then had the privilege of following the entire campaign at the EPFA Cup in Geneva in 2022, which you've already spoken about very briefly. And that tournament was a real turning point, because you guided Scotland to their first ever qualification for the Nations Cup, where they're going to go toe-to-toe with the likes of Spain, Germany, Belgium, all others that were present at that competition. Of course, your impact with Scotland, as you've said as well, wasn't just limited to the sidelines, vice chair and chair of the Scottish Powerchair Football Association, helping to grow the domestic game. But onto the EPFA Cup, that gave me the real emotional connection with Scotland. I made friendships for life, and it's something that's really stayed with me. Two players in particular, there was Logan Mitchelson and Colin Shields, who were absolutely central to that squad and qualification. Tragically, we've lost both since then, and I just want to take this opportunity to make sure that their names and legacy are given the recognition that they deserve. For you, looking back on that tournament and the squad you had, what were the standout memories? And thinking about Logan and Colin specifically, what did they mean to that group, and what sort of legacy do you think they've left behind in Scottish Powerchair football?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, probably two of the, or if not the two biggest names in Scottish Powerchair football, and two absolute gentlemen, both on and off the pitch. As a coach, an absolute dream to work with. Whether they agreed or disagreed with the direction you're going down, they went and applied it. They went and worked hard. They drove the standards for everyone else, both on and off the pitch. And I know we talk about me being on my phone all the time, and it's come up a few times, but again, the last couple of days, Logan and Colin has been key to what I've been doing. up here in Scotland as I try and push for their legacy across the Scottish FA as well. So we're just, where are we? We're just over a year for Logan, a couple of months for Colin since their passing, and we are still fighting for their legacy to go on, because they certainly made an impact on the squad that are going out there just now, and the coaching team and the families as well, and at club level the clubs that are left behind both in Scotland and England. So it's important that we do recognise, because it's unfortunately it's the downside of our sport across the world, is the players that we lose along the way. And I suppose for all of us who are in the sport for all the right reasons, that's the driving force, isn't it? We want the best for the players in the time that we've got. We want to win at elite level, but we need to make memories for the families that are there. It's important to remember that. Which, sorry, took me kind of off topic there. I'll go back to EPFA and Geneva. Yeah. First, like you say, major competition that Scotland had qualified for. We'd done the Tri-Nations and Home Nations. We'd played friendly games up until then. Relatively going to a competition as an unknown nation of what to expect. But for us as well, also where to base ourselves as a standardisation. So I didn't really have a benchmark on previous squads of where to go. Very lucky that I had successful and talented players such as Logan and Colin, with Connor out there with us, who finished tournament top goal scorer. And again, sort of the same message that we have for England just now, is very much a squad. We used absolutely every single player, and they all played their parts on and off the pitch for different tactical reasons. Some were played in different games, and for different shape reasons. Others were played as well. Probably my disappointing thing as a coach was getting, as I mentioned, unbeaten all the way up to the final and losing. But then in my head, with sort of minutes to go, up against a strong Belgium side, I was well aware that every single player had played a part. So every single player then made it onto the pitch, so that they knew they were a European finalist and had that. So that was sort of a proud moment that hopefully they carry with them. The tournament itself opened my eyes up in terms of organisation and what sort of I expect and what I would like in tournaments and the standards, and what went well for us and what was organised well for us as well. So like I say, although we're there in a coaching role, at that time I still had the chairperson's hat on as well, so it's trying to balance what we expect on those standards as well. But yeah, what a competition. And like you say, some of the teams we're now facing Europe, we've got Spain, Italy, Germany, that we'll all see out there. And of course, England have been drawn in a group with Scotland. So I'll be up against some of the familiar faces from the get-go.
Yeah. We'll definitely get into that. But yeah, I think you're right to say that whilst it was it's the elite end of sport, it's also about making memories. Memories are so important, and I absolutely loved following your journey with that squad. I was lucky enough to spend so much time with you on and off the court, and there was something really special about the whole group. And I can say now, because there's been a few years since, my impartiality when it comes to commentary was tested more in that fixture versus Belgium than any other game I've ever covered. And I would encapsulate the World Cup final between England and France in that. I remember getting so frustrated with some of the referee decisions and feeling myself getting more and more agitated as the game went on, even having to step out at full time once Scotland were confirmed as the runners-up. But since then, thankfully, I've learnt to really detach my personal affiliations when it comes to that, so full professionalism. But a big part of that connection and that affiliation, for me personally, comes through Logan Mitchelson and his family. I think a lot of people might not realise just how close Logan and I were. We'd often sit down to analyse games together, whether that's with clubs, countries, training, transfers, truly any and everything, and he had such an infectious personality, and I really do miss him so much. I wear a chain around my neck with a Logan Bear charm, which never comes off, so in a small way I get to carry him and his legacy with me to all of these incredible camps and competitions and countries, and Italy will be included in that. What I also now carry is an enormous soft spot for that whole Scotland squad, and while I know it's not quite on your level, Craig, I'll admit when England and Scotland meet in the group, there'll definitely be a small part of me that feels that inner conflict. Have you had a moment to process what that might feel like for you personally? Because you're in such a unique position, someone who helped Scotland get to this level and now finds themselves preparing to face them with England. And just for context, for those that don't know, England and Scotland are drawn into the same group, so will contest a game against one another.
Yeah. The pace of Powerchair football moves so fast, doesn't it, that probably I don't get a chance to process as much. I remember announcing to my Scotland team, I felt it was only fair to do that in person, face to face, and coaching staff that I'll be moving, or first of all finishing in Scotland and then moving to England from there on. So we still had one training camp together at Largs at Inverclyde where we play the home nations. So it was a weekend spent with the team, almost like a send-off. So obviously you'd expect. I got the what would you say, congratulations, but also the sort of jokes, if you like, alongside leaving and going across border. But the players have been great with me. I'm lucky I still coach a lot of them at club level, so I see them on a weekly basis there. Families have been amazing with me, like they've been on the journey with me for 10-15 years, some of them, alongside the likes of Logan and Colin, who had been as well. So they have been great on that side of things. We also played against each other in the senior home nations this year, so that was my first kind of inner conflict, if you like, in terms of playing against my former club, my former team, from there. But to be fair, again, crowd wise, atmosphere, players, the respect was all there on both sides. So I am sure out in Italy it'll be the exact same. And to be honest, you know what the Powerchair community is like off the pitch. Everybody kind of helps and supports each other from there on. Depending on the result, I might not be able to sit beside a few people for a day or two afterwards. They might not welcome me, but jokes aside, everyone has been great with me, to be honest.
And beyond that England game, there'll be a lot of support on your behalf for Scotland. The move to England and the England setup presents a very different scale of responsibility, with more players, more teams, and a more established player pathway. The challenges in selecting a national squad is, relatively speaking, on a completely different level, which I imagine shifts how you approach things as a coach too. Going from leading Scotland to now helping to guide England, was there any inner conflict?
No, I don't think so. I don't know if it's just sport nowadays. We see people move more often, we're more used to it, and desensitised to it, if you like. I think the first sort of week or two working, it took a bit of getting used to, putting on obviously a different kit, representing a different country. But to be honest, just the people I'm working with day in and day out have just made it seem so seamless and so not easy, that's not the right word, but they've welcomed me very well, we'll put it that way. And then again, still being involved in a club level up here in Scotland, I suppose, has eased that as well, because I'm still seeing a large population of the Scottish Powerchair family if you like, on a regular basis, and then at league days I'm seeing even more.
For sure. And just briefly, what does the current pathway look like in Scotland? Because it's not something I'm overly familiar with. And although you're no longer involved directly, having seen the growth of players who've come down to play their domestic football in England, has that made an impact?
Yeah, so certainly towards the end of my spell as chair, we were looking to introduce development leagues, and we'd started those for 2 years, and that was for players who first either want to get involved in Powerchair football, potentially have moved to a team midway through a season and might find themselves either on the bench or not getting involved in squads, but still wanting to learn the game and develop their understanding. So players were invited to attend either as an individual or as a squad, and we would mix the teams that way. And you would ultimately just be playing games. There'd be referees there, and it's a chance to develop the referees as well for new who are coming into the game, or there'll be established referees, and they will play our matches. We would stop, explain decisions, and then play again. So basically learning as you play. That was kind of the first level, if you like. In Scotland, they've then got the Championship, and we've got a Premiership league as well. So there's 2 official tiers and a 3rd development league to it. Cup competitions similar to England. So you've got a League Cup and you've got a Scottish Cup. The League Cup, depending on where you finish, in top half or bottom half, is split up into a second competition, which is a League Cup plate. That way teams are then exposed to multiple competitions. So there's ultimately 3 cups that you can play for at your club level as well as your league. And yeah, we at one stage there was Champions League qualification. However, that was, let's say, edited by FIFA. So Scotland aren't one of the countries just now, or EPFA, sorry, not FIFA. One of the countries that qualify for Champions League, but that is something they'll be hoping to kind of push for as well, because the standards of players are improving. They are a development league and have been, or a developed league and have been established since 2015. So they feel the product is there, and like you say, there are now players regularly playing within the WFA in multiple different teams. I think there's players at Newcastle, there is players in Middlesbrough. We've had Logan as a prime example, who kind of pioneered it. He had been to Northern Thunder in West Brom, and you've got players down in Manchester, and so on in Sale. So yeah, there are players kind of making the journey, and I know where some of them stay in Scotland, and it's a relative journey. It's 5, 6, 7, 8 hours there and back, multiple times a week, to try and develop their game, their understanding, and a lot of those players are then pushing for their national team as well.
Yeah, it's an inner conflict that I have when it comes to international or overseas players coming to compete in England. It enriches our division, and it's fantastic to see. You've highlighted some of the Scottish players that are currently competing in England, but there is so much involved with making that a reality: time, effort, energy, money. And I don't necessarily want to say to a Scottish player, you have to come and compete in England if you are to progress or fast track or make yourself a better player. There's no doubt that the increased intensity in games and the quality of opposition is a step up from that in Scotland, because Scotland, relatively speaking, is still a development nation in terms of trying to get a core cohort of players, a nation competing on the top stage. You've spoken about the Champions League. But you can see what benefits it will have to the Scotland national team, because several of their players do play high-level Powerchair football in England. And it's not just exclusive to Scotland. We're seeing Irish players come over, we're seeing Danish players come over to really test their ability at the top level, because that is what will best prepare them for the Nations Cup, which is a nice segue onto the Nations Cup. Taking place in Italy from the 19th to the 24th of September, the competition will see 10 nations from across Europe compete for the continent's biggest prize, and England head into the tournament as defending champions. The group draw has handed the reigning champions fixtures against the Republic of Ireland, Denmark, Scotland and Italy, I believe. A real competitive mix that offers plenty of challenges, but also the opportunity to find the rhythm and build confidence early on, because you could say that the alternate side of the draw is slightly more challenging. When you saw the draw come out, what were your initial thoughts?
Yeah, so we were, where was I? I was at the home nations. So we were gathered all together, Scotland, England, Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland, all in the one room, watching the draw live. So that kind of added sort of a unique atmosphere, if you like, across the Powerchair wider family. And of course, Republic of Ireland and Scotland and ourselves all drawn into one pot. So ultimately playing out another mini home nations, if you like, alongside Italy and Denmark. We know there'll be challenges there. We know, or we think we know, how a lot of the teams will shape up. So again, they will be different as well. So it's things for Adam and myself to look at, test ourselves, show our squad's sort of adaptiveness, if you like, and how we approach different situations in different teams, and actually for our players to showcase the skills they've got across a range of multiple obstacles and challenges. We know you've touched upon the other side of the draw. There's some real strong teams on that side as well. The likes of France and Belgium being key ones. Belgium, although they come in relatively unknown to some, thankfully I've had the pleasure of playing against the players and coming against Robin, the coach, on a couple of occasions.
They're a good team, aren't they?
Yeah, we've been able to watch a lot of the fixtures that they've posted up, so we do have material on that side, and the players that they've got and the leagues that they're playing in France, as well as Belgium, we're able to look at. So we know there's strong opposition throughout the tournament, and it's just how we navigate our way through as we try to retain the trophy.
And opening up against Ireland, how important will that first game be in setting the tone and the expectation, especially in a tournament where the schedule moves so quickly?
Yeah, that has to be our benchmark. You know, all eyes are on you at that point. You need to get off strongly, you need to put in a performance from first whistle to the last, both in our open play, what we do in possession and what the players do out of possession needs to be at such a high level, and the players are more than capable of doing that. And for us as coaches is looking for any areas of weakness within the opponents, any structural or shape changes or adaptations that we then might have to note for later stages of the competition as well, and how we then combat that, because we'll then have a training plan to implement and look towards from there on. So yeah, the groups throw up some challenges, some hurdles, but ultimately we want to go out there and just put on the best performances we can and showcase the real talents that we've got at our disposal.
Yeah, that's an understatement. Just being part of that camp last week, some of the football being played by our squad is just outstanding. So it's really exciting to see how they gel as a collective on a really important stage, and going in as reigning champions, it's almost for the first time a really unique opportunity, and also comes with so much expectation, because ultimately knowing the levels that England want to aspire to, anything less than that trophy would be seen as a disappointment. England face Scotland in the group, and I'll be told off if I don't ask this. Who do you want to win? Feel free to give me the political answer.
Yeah, personally I want to do well in everything I can, so I'll be looking for ourselves to win in England.
No, that's great. And There's one more camp, I believe, between now and then. When is that taking place, and what do you think the focus of that will be?
Yeah, we have a camp at the start of September. Focus on that will be... We've spent a lot of work looking at whether it's the home nations, whether it's USA, on how other teams play, and how we break that down. So we'll be looking at probably how we position our squad to play against that. And that is something we touched upon it before with a lot of our players being coaches. When we then go in and ask our players to play like other countries, they adapt to that so quickly, which gives us food for thought as well, because we then see how players react in other shapes and formations, and we're seeing some players thrive in different ways that we know that we can then adapt our game in that situation as well. But yeah, we'll be looking at opposition plays, shapes, set plays, as we've mentioned before, be a big part of our focus in our game, and really getting the players in the right sort of context and mindset going towards there. If I take my coaching hat off and go back to team manager, I'll need to make sure everything's in place for them that they've asked for, or as much as the host can provide us with for that. So, for example, just now I'm currently linking on flights, rooms, accommodation, meals, all in preparation for September, that sort of thing, as well as any off-court additions that will help make our week more comfortable, if you like.
And on that topic of off court, we spoke a little bit off air. Can you just touch briefly on some of the roles and responsibilities that come under your title as team manager in terms of that player development, maybe the mental or psychological side?
Yeah, certainly. It's like, as I mentioned, we're not just players, we're people as well. So the individuals that we're working with, we know they've got their work stresses, they've got family lives, they've got issues going on in the background that necessarily might not talk about or might not want to. So it's making sure that they're comfortable and honest conversations can happen, advice can be given, or help can be sought and given as well. So I do have that responsibility on the side, as well as every coach does with their duty of care, but it's just making sure that everything's sort of in place that way. It might be due to some of the paperwork that's coming in, some of the documents that are needed, some of the information that we're looking for. How can my role further help and develop and support the player or the families to make that side of things easier? We know it's a stress travelling abroad, then especially trying to add in navigating, getting power chairs across, getting your day chair across, all your equipment, as well as just your day-to-day family essentials. So try and ease as much of the pressure on that side that I can do. I'll look at the side of kits, so that the players don't have to worry about what they're wearing each day and when they're getting it, that sort of thing. Is the numbers right? Are the names right? Are the number boards correct? I'll deal with all that side of things, certainly for the pitch, so we're ready for that. How is the nutrition looking? Has the physio got everything they need? Has the doctors got everything they need? I'll look at, and I've scoped out nearest hospitals, pharmacies, transportation links, that sort of side of things. So there is a wider scope to my role around the Euros before we go, and also when we're there as well. And then there'll be a review afterwards, to make sure that if what went well, but ultimately can we do anything better in the future as we prepare for a World Cup in the not so distant future as well.
So yeah, on that, the primary goal at the Nations Cup is of course retain the title, but there is that added incentive of World Cup qualification, with the top 5 teams, I believe, booking their place at Argentina in 2026. Is that something that's spoken about within the group, or is the approach simply you take care of business in Italy and by default you will qualify?
Yeah, second option there. We take care of our business first and foremost, each game as it comes, with the intention of retaining the trophy and bringing it back to St George's Park. If we do that job, we set ourselves up in a good position and a good place going into the World Cup. hopefully is a high level threat to every other opposition that are coming up against us, because we're more than capable of achieving that, and the players are more than capable of shown already in the previous European run and World Cup campaigns of reaching finals. And for Adam and myself, it's getting that silverware that we feel the players and all of the staff around the players and our programme leads deserve.
Well, we want to wish the entire England squad, coaching staff and the support team the very best of luck as preparations do continue for that Nations Cup. It's a huge few weeks, and it's only a few weeks when you think about it away now, which is crazy. And certainly in England, we don't have National League football prior to the EPFA Nations Cup, so that's the next thing for everyone to look forward to. And I know, personally speaking, I cannot wait to get out to Italy, obviously in a wider, more encompassing communications role, but ultimately a huge fan of England, and I'll have strong hopes that they come through as champions. Just want to say a massive thank you, Craig, for joining us today and offering all the insights on your journey. As ever, a huge thank you to MK Battery for powering this podcast and their continued support of Powerchair Football at every level. And thank you to everyone tuning in. We will be back, no doubt, very soon with another episode. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you, and thank you for having us as well and for your support as always.
My pleasure.